So hello guys. My topic today is the potential implications of Trump's White House return to the global energy markets and policy. I am Muse, and I am a environmental technology master's student at Imperial, and I specialize in energy policy. So, so here we are. Trump is back in the White House. I would like you guys to brainstorm, what comes up to mind when it comes to Trump's major accomplishments in terms of the energy sector? Do you guys have any ideas? Yeah, yeah,
First,
yeah.
I think he failed to do, failing to bring back coal.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, yeah. So yes, so this is the agenda of the seminar today, and basically I'm going to talk about how Trump's return to the White House is going to affect the US, EU, China, Middle East, and the global energy market changes and policy changes. So those will be the key takeaways at the very end. So first of all, everyone knows that Trump has been back in the White House for about 4 days right now, and so why is this topic, of interest to us? The reason for this is because the U.S. is a major energy producer and consumer, and the changes in the American energy policy can greatly alter the global energy supply and demand dynamics, environmental regulations, climate commitments, international trade, and geopolitical relations. So basically, Trump's return can affect the world politics, on a massive scale. So basically, the objective of my presentation today is to predict the changes in the global energy markets and policies brought by the incoming Trump administration based on historical evidence and the policy agenda of his election campaign. So let's talk about Trump's major accomplishments in his first term. So everyone knows that U.S. exited the Paris Agreement, and despite withdrawing from the Paris Agreement, America actually achieved the largest decline in carbon emissions of any country on Earth in 2019. And since withdrawing from the Paris Agreement, the United States has reduced carbon emissions more than any nation. And in terms and one major accomplishment of Trump is that the United States became a net energy exporter during his first term. So so the United States has been a net natural gas exporter for the 3 consecutive years and has an export capacity of nearly 10 billion cubic feet per day. Trump's administration streamlined liquefied natural gas, which I'll call as LNG, terminal permitting and allowed long-term LNG export authorizations to be extended through 2050. As a result, the US increased LNG exports fivefold since January 2017, reaching an all-time high in January 2020. The United States is now among the top 3 LNG exporters in the world. So for the energy prices, uh, after Trump left office, I think it was in 2022, there was a gas price inflation in America, and lowering the gas prices for Americans was a major campaign promise, for Trump's second election campaign. So the energy prices were greatly lowered because his administration increased the domestic production of American oil and gas through easing restrictions on oil and gas drilling. Moreover, there was no major wars during Trump's first administration. contributing to relative stability in major oil-producing regions, which helped avoid significant disruptions to supply and kept prices stable. So for the Russian energy, so basically, Trump prevented the domination of Russian energy across Europe through various lines of effort, which included the Partnership for Transatlantic Energy Cooperation, civil nuclear deals with Romania and Poland, and opposition to the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. And also, renewable energy production and consumption actually reached record highs in 2019, despite Trump's disdain for renewable energy. So let's talk about Trump's current energy policy. As of right now, Trump's major, energy policy, is that he wants to make America the dominant producer of oil and gas in the world. And he will do this by lifting restrictions such as the Antiquities Act on American energy production and terminating the Green New Deal, which most Republicans feel as socialist. He will also repeal a 2023 memo from President Joe Biden that barred oil drilling in 60 million acres in the Arctic. He will also increase the energy production across the board, streamline permitting, and end market distorting restrictions on oil, natural gas, and coal. So, in terms of increasing the energy production from various sources, Trump has also declared a national energy emergency, which he promises to fill up the strategic oil reserves and export US energy all over the world. This can be done. He will unleash energy production from all sources of energy, which includes nuclear energy, to immediately slash the inflation of gas prices. So, regarding the gas prices right now, Trump's administration is currently in talks with President Zelensky of Ukraine to end the Russian-Ukraine war. This could bring geopolitical stability within Europe. And if the war does end, this can lead to the lifting of some sanctions on the Russian energy supply and allow Russia to increase its gas exports. As a result, increasing the energy supply to the market and potentially lowering the gas prices and oil prices. So, regarding the EV ownership, so this includes an executive order setting a goal that by 2030, half of the new vehicles sold should be EVs, and major tax credits for consumers and manufacturers, stringent federal emission standards, and state-level EV emissions. So basically, Trump is going to repeal, this executive order, which was implemented by Joe Biden. So first of all, let's talk about the U.S. domestic energy market changes. So as you can see here, this graph shows the U.S. primary energy consumption by major sources throughout the years, and mostly, from the 1950s to 2020, the U.S. primarily consumes energy, from fossil fuels, but not so much from renewables. So, if we're talking about 2023, 82% of U.S. energy came from fossil fuels, and while 8.8% of U.S. energy came from renewables. So, the percentage of the U.S. energy that comes from fossil fuels, is likely going to increase by a few percentage points now that Trump is back in office. And for the renewable energy, wind and solar were the fastest growing renewable sources, but it contributed to less than 3% of the total energy consumption in the United States. So now that Trump is back in office, the growth in renewable energy sources will likely slow down a bit, and because Trump's government administration is no longer subsidizing new windmill farms, and Trump has said again and again that he doesn't even want one windmill farm to be built. The U.S. energy market will likely be more dominated by fossil fuels because of the massive increase in fossil fuels and oil and gas production. So energy independence, will be achieved by the United States, like Trump's first term, because the U.S. will be less reliant on foreign energy sources, such as those from China and Russia. The U.S. is already the world's largest crude oil producer, with output set to peak at about 15.1 million billions per 15.1 million barrels per day by 2030. So regarding the energy prices, the increased domestic energy supply, within the U.S. is going alongside with a similar demand, is going with a similar demand, and with like even more Russian gas imported to the United States, is going to bring down the gas prices based on the supply and demand dynamics. So let's talk about Europe. So the EU spokesperson said that adding the EU was said that the EU was also very committed to phasing out energy imports from Russia and to diversify their supply sources. So the reason for this is because of the strained relationship between the EU and Russia right now because of the Russia and Ukraine war. The EU, the primary goal of EU right now is to ensure that the EU, achieves energy security and geopolitical stability. So Europe has significantly ramped up imports of LNG from the US over the past 3 years as Brussels seeks to diversify sources of supply away from Russia. So in terms of the total gas imports, LNG and pipelines, with LNG and pipelines combined, the US exports covered a fifth of the EU demand last year, second to Norway, which imported 30% of gas to the EU. So Trump's exit from the Paris Agreement is likely going to cause a domestic rollback of environmental regulations and withdrawal from multiple, and might potentially cause multiple countries to withdraw from the international climate agreement. And his Trump's exit from the Paris Agreement can also bolster other European countries to increase their fossil fuel production, because the US is still considered as the leader in the free world and the West. So as a very influential country, and the US can likely bolster like right-wing politicians to increase their fossil fuel production. This shift could undermine the EU's leadership, in climate action, and hinder international efforts to combat climate change. So, with the Russia and Ukraine war ending soon, so Zelensky has time to time again said that he is very confident that Trump can broker peace with Russia, and this can cause the energy supply chain to be restored to normal very soon. So how will this affect the energy market of the EU. So with the Russia and Ukraine war drawing to a close, the energy supply chain will soon be restored to normal, and with an increased energy supply, the energy prices of European countries will go down and hopefully return to the levels pre-war. So let's take Britain as an example. In winter 2021, it was shortly before the war began. The average annual bill for gas and electricity was £1,214.6. Just basically 1,200. So, but now with the current price cap, the annual bill is around £1,800, which is a 51% increase from 2021. So hopefully, once the Russia and Ukraine war ends, the energy prices of Britain and other European countries can go back to pre-war levels. So Trump's rejection of the Paris Agreement and European Green Deal can lead to a shift towards a less cooperative energy diplomacy. Uh, so this so the transatlantic relationship, which I mean here by Europe and the United States, might be undermined, because of Trump's exit from the Paris Agreement. So this could lead to less joint renewable energy initiatives and investments in renewable energy projects in the future. So once again, American energy imports will likely dominate the EU energy market because of the large amounts of American energy supplies, from America. So let's talk about China. Trump has been known for launching a trade war towards China during his first term. So similar to his first administration, Trump will likely start a trade war on China by imposing 60% of tariffs on Chinese goods. So during Trump's first presidential campaign in 2016, he has talked about imposing tariffs of 45% on all Chinese goods. And by 2020, the US tariffs on Chinese goods had increased from 3% to 21% and have remained at around that level. And also, the US has already imposed a 100% import tax on Chinese EVs. Beijing's so basically apart and Beijing's bet on imports of EVs, lithium batteries, and solar panels to drive the country's economy might prove risky if Trump is able to persuade other countries to impose high tariffs, on such products. So regarding the last point here, uh, Trump demanding China to purchase additional American LNG. So a plan for a 20 million ton per year Alaska LNG plant was first discussed in 2017 during Trump's first visit to China, with the state Sinopec, which is a very famous and large Chinese oil and gas company, and the Bank of China. So basically, Trump was discussed with Sinopec and the Bank of China, for a 20 million ton per year Alaska LNG plant to be built in Alaska in the United States. This possibility, of Trump implementing this policy, again, during his second term, resurfaced earlier this month. So yeah. So how would this affect the Chinese energy market? So first of all, there will so regarding the global renewables industry, China and the US has competed across a clean energy sector for many years. And this starts with the EVs that China produces and sells at much lower costs to consumers compared to in America. So both countries are developing ultra high voltage grid technology and advanced nuclear reactors. So as a large supplier of transformers, um, China, China has, China has raised and lowered the voltages to move power across the grids. So that's the way China approaches, their national grid. And multiple U.S. administrations have failed to ensure more critical generators that are made on the U.S. soil. So as a result, uh, with China's, like booming EV industry and solar panel and lithium batteries industry, China might become the leader in the global renewables industry. Considering that now that the American renewables industry, might not be as good as before. Now that Trump is back. So, talking about the tariffs, if Trump carries Trump does what he says, he carries out the tariffs, this could cause a global supply chain shocks that will raise the costs of U.S. energy investments, not only for wind turbines, solar cells, and battery materials, but for the price of steel, which U.S. companies need to make good on Trump's pledge to accelerate oil and natural gas production. So, regarding China's, influence in the international climate policy deliberations. So China has become a major investor in renewable energy projects throughout Africa and other parts of the global south. The country has already produced 80% of the world's solar panels, and it controls 60% of the world's wind turbine production complete capacity. So if Trump abolishes the Green New Deal, so basically this Green New Deal, actually uh, is an American bill that was introduced in 2019 by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez to ensure that the U.S. can meet their climate commitments, which is net zero by 2050, and to invest, in to and has to like invest, a lot of money in the renewables and climate change industry. So basically, if Trump abolishes the Green New Deal, this would mean less competition from China on cutting-edge renewables technology due to the U.S. renewable industry receiving less federal funding. So let's talk about the Middle East. So one very important fact is that the OPEC, Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, are these countries in yellow here, and mostly Middle Eastern countries and South American countries. So so Iran is a major oil exporter in the world. And during Trump's first administration, it took action intended to bring Iran's oil exports to zero and deny the regime its principal source of revenue. He withdrew the United States from the horrible Iran nuclear deal and imposed the toughest sanctions ever placed on Iran, as the Iranian regime has long used its oil revenues to support terrorist activities across the Middle East and to destabilize, the Middle East and uh, geo the Middle East and global geopolitical relationships. So basically, for the second point regarding OPEC, since the shale revolution, the OPEC has since the shale revolution in 2007, OPEC has steadily lost market share to the United States. So the American supply actually overtook Saudi Arabia in 2014 and has reached record levels under Joe Biden. So the global demand growth has slowed and is too weak to soak up additional oil coming from the United States and other non-OPEC producers, such as Brazil, Canada, and Norway. The US Energy Information Administration forecasts an increase of 1 million barrels per day in oil and LNG demand this year. And both are below the pre-pandemic 10-year average of 1.5 million barrels per day of annual growth. A price war, which is defined by raising the output, raising the revenue, to drive out higher cost competitors, may break out, in the Middle East because the Middle East, wants to, eliminate the United States power in the Middle Eastern energy markets, in order to make, upstream oil investment in the United States and elsewhere less attractive. So about the energy market changes in the Middle East, the prices, gas and oil prices might be lowered, due to the supply and demand dynamics with more American oil supply, and hopefully, if the Israel and Palestine war can end soon, which right now there's a ceasefire right now, geopolitical stability, might be ensured right now in the Middle East, and the Middle Eastern oil and gas supply, might, resume to pre-war levels, hopefully. So for the weakening of the OPEC, so if the U.S. oil production increases under Trump's administration, that could complicate the OPEC and the alliance, desire to raise its output without causing a sell-off in prices. For the Iranian oil exports, the tighter U.S. sanctions on Iran might bring benefits for the Gulf Cooperation Council oil exporters. A revival of Trump's maximum pressure campaign could take roughly 1 million barrels per day of Iranian exports off the global oil market. Such a loss of supply might lift oil prices sufficiently to allow OPEC, major countries such as Saudi Arabia and the UAE to release some spare capacity and boost exports. So the sanctions on Iran can minimize Iranian oil exporters, and hence, effectively minimizing Iran's economic power. So let's talk about the global energy policy changes now. So basically for the overall, global worldwide, energy policy changes, one major one is Trump exiting from the Paris Agreement, so I'm going to briefly state what the Paris Agreement is about. The Paris Agreement was negotiated by 196 parties, at the 2015 UN Climate Change Conference near Paris, and its goal is to hold the increase in the global average temperature to well below 2 degrees above pre-industrial levels, and to pursue efforts to limit the temperature increase to 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels. So basically, the Paris Agreement, the major goal of the Paris Agreement is to ensure that countries all over the world are committed to combating the climate change and to make progress, towards net zero by 2050. So regarding the second point, Trump will lift restrictions on oil and gas drilling within the United States, and this can significantly boost the American domestic energy production. And so this might cause a lot more energy, American energy supplies to different parts of the world. So so obviously the exit of the US from the Paris Agreement will definitely undermine the global efforts to combat climate change. Um, Without the US leadership, the world will fall even further behind the Paris Agreement. Uh, the goal fall further behind the goal of the Paris Agreement, which is to limit the Earth's warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. So as for the second point, as the leader of the free world, the deprioritization of the ESG and renewable energy will definitely within the United States can definitely embolden other countries to do the same. And so this will likely going to cause uh, uh, less jobs within the ESG and sustainability industry in this coming few years, whether it's in the US or worldwide globally, because it might be perceived as less important than before. And as talked about before, the American energy and fossil fuels will be more dominant on the global energy market because of the massive increase in American oil and gas. So and hopefully, the increased U.S. American energy supply can bring down the prices of oil and gas worldwide. And definitely the renewable energy, transition is going to slow down a bit because of less federal funding, towards the American renewables energy industry, and renewables might not be seen as important for the current energy landscape right now. So what are the potential risks and challenges with Trump returning back to the White House? I would say the most important one is the ESG and renewables industry um, being undermined, because there will be like fewer ESG and sustainability jobs worldwide. The revenue generated by with the renewable startups and big companies is going to go down a bit as it is not as popular or as in demand as before. And the sustainability departments in the big corporations might likely might be might close because it might not be seen as important before. Uh, so basically, the fate of the sustainability departments within big corporations, or ESG, might be similar to what DEI is right now, because ever since Trump going back to office, multiple companies, big companies, and even the U.S. government has already, closed the DEI department, close the DEI department because they don't see that as important as before, and and um and they just feel like, oh, the DEI is not as supported, that they do not feel like the DEI and sustainability initiatives are as supported as many people as before. And talking about ESG, E S, which stands for social, might be the first, to be, undermined, because of the current trend of, DEI being undermined, by the Trump administration. So Trump's exit from the Paris Agreement might undermine the global climate mitigation efforts. Uh, there might be like less, joint agreements and less, international funding towards climate change, and this might actually, slow down our path to net zero. And moreover, geopolitical tensions might be intensified because of Trump's, tariffs and sanctions on China, Iran, and potentially Canada as well. And also with Trump, talking about buying Greenland and Canada, this might actually, I mean, there cause some disagreements, within Canadians and people from Greenland, because not all of them are going to agree with this decision. And even one point that I would like to add is one major reason for Trump talking about buying these countries is because of the ample natural resources within these countries that could help benefit the U.S. Energy industry. And it is likely that people from Canada and Greenland might not be happy with the United States, uh, take taking away their resources, for their own benefit. Yeah. So there are some opportunities and benefits that come along the way. The most important one is the American oil and gas industry is going to be prosperous, because with Trump wanting to increase, ex expanding the American oil and gas industry, this can definitely bring more jobs and revenue, for American oil and gas companies, uh, and this can definitely, uh, mitigate, the unemployment rate, within America, and make this can generate make more, American oil and gas companies richer. So for the second point, tr Trump's investments in energy infrastructure projects can definitely boost the efficiency, reliability, and resilience of the energy grids and systems within America itself. So, the key takeaways from my presentation today is that Trump's second presidency has the potential to bring both benefits and risks, to the energy sector, whether it's in America, China, Middle East, Europe, or worldwide. So it is likely that the global fossil fuel sector will thrive better than before, while the global renewables and ESG sector will likely be undermined. And tariffs, and sanctions can definitely intensify the geopolitical tensions, between different countries and continents. So that's the end of my presentation. So I guess it's the Q&A section.
How would Trump 4 year presidency would affect the energy and renewable sector in longer run, like 20?
Yeah.
Do you have any
Yeah.
view on that?
So that's a very good question. I think that if you're talking about the long term, one very important factor that we have to take into account is who is going to be the president, after Trump, after when Trump's second presidency ends. This will definitely, I believe that whoever is whoever is Trump's whoever comes after Trump, will determine the energy sector, in the longer run, in even 10 years time. But definitely Trump's second presidency definitely has can definitely affect the energy sector, like in in I would say secondary ways, compared to his whoever comes after him. So I think that that would definitely slow down the global efforts, to net zero, trans the towards the renewable the transition towards renewables. I think it would be like slow down a bit, but it's not going to be like catastrophic, like it's not going to be like, oh, we're never going to reach net zero and totally shift, to clean power by 2050, but it might just like hinder our progress. Yeah. But to answer your question, one really important one is like who is going to be the president after Trump. Yeah, yeah.
See that changing.
Yes, thank you for your question. So, from the UK, uh, uh, sorry, can I go back to? I think most likely the UK the renewable sector of the UK um might be slightly affected, by Trump's, policies, towards renewables, because if Trump, as the leader of the free world, says that, oh, he doesn't like renewables and he might contribute less to uh renewables joint, initiatives, joint international initiatives, about renewables and USG, and this might I think this might somewhat hinder the UK's transition towards renewables, because there might be less transatlantic, like American and British, joint initiatives, joint investments, towards renewables, and this might somewhat like harm the UK. But most likely, I don't think that Trump's presidency is going to have to make like major changes towards the UK energy sector, because the UK has always been like the leader of the renewables in the EU, and uh, the UK mostly, just invests in its own, renewables energy, or just uh, or at least, the UK mostly, partners with other European countries more than the US, when it comes to energy and renewables. So I hope that answers your question. Oh,
Do you think framing renewables development around energy independence and security of supply is the way to go to keep renewable development going, or bit of action?
sorry, can you repeat that? It was a bit long.
Yeah, so they asked if framing the development of renewables around things like energy independence, security of supply, if you think that's kind of the way to go to keep renewable development going, or do you think climate action is kind of a better path to take?
Okay. Uh, 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 I think that like both are important, uh, because both, climate action, commitments, uh yeah, and the renewables industry, are both very vital, towards our trans to reaching net zero by 2050, and to support clean power. uh, I would say it's kind of equal, for both. Uh uh because, if we uh climate action, commitments, you know, between, various stakeholders, between various countries, is very important, that, they have to like commit to like net zero by 2050, keep reminding ourselves, oh, this is a commitment that we should be, that we should be able to like implement, like in the future, to achieve in the future. And uh while, for renewables, it is very important that, we can transition to like clean power, so that there are actually less carbon emissions like emitted, uh, um, like in present and future generations. So that this is very important towards, the most practical way towards achieving that zero by 2050. Yeah, that is a really interesting question, considering that Elon Musk, the CEO of Tesla, uh is a buddy right now with Trump, and for Tesla. That's actually a really interesting question. Uh, Actually, I haven't read much about how I haven't really read much about like how Elon Musk, reacts to, Trump's canceling the efforts to boost EV ownership. I don't really know that much about this topic, but from what I know, but what I've read right now is that, I think that, uh the despite Trump canceling the efforts to boost EV ownership, I think I would say that perhaps Trump wants to take a more encouraging approach when it comes to EVs, because the current uh executive order that was signed by Joe Biden, was that to set a goal that by 2030, half of the new vehicles sold should be EVs, and there are really strict federal emission standards and state level EV mandates. Um, I would say that perhaps Trump wants use a more more encouraging approach, which is perhaps, I don't know, provide more subsidies towards like EVs, or use a less kind of socialist approach, with less regulations when it comes to EVs, to boost the EV sales. Yeah, use a more like business, business, business perspective, to boost the EV ownership, instead of using like regulations and mandates. Yeah.
That should the war in Ukraine end, surely any Trump brokered deal will be conditional on no negative impact on US natural gas export. Sorry.
Yes. So it might be likely that the Russian energy imports, towards the EU, will be lower than the pre-war levels, because the EU, ever since the Ukraine and Russia war, the EU has already boycotted Russia, on many occasions and on many political decisions, and the EU might not be as willing to supply, uh might be might be likely to impose like more restrictions on Russian oil and gas drilling, or Russian and oil and gas like business, to limit the power of Russia within the EU. So yeah, and so that's why I believe that the Russian energy imports will be less than pre-war levels, if that answers the question.
What retaliatory responses is China likely to reach for in response to US tariffs, and what will be their global effect?
So can you repeat the question?
They're asking how you think China might retaliate in response to the US tariffs, and kind of what the global effect of those tariffs might be.
Okay. Thank you for your question. Uh, I'm from Hong Kong, so basically, I I would predict that China might respond to the Trump's tariffs, by imposing very high, like even higher tariffs on American goods, to retaliate. So this would actually just like cause a trade war to explode, between China and US. And uh so how would in terms of how would this affect the global markets, is that uh this might uh so I think that I do not I don't think I don't know that much about how like economics work, but I think that the US and whatever trade war that breaks out between the US and China, um uh I think it's just mostly America and China bearing the the consequences of the trade war that they started between each other. But for other countries, like perhaps let's say EU on the Middle East, as long as the relations between China and the US, are fine and pretty stable. I don't think that will cause too much of. I don't think the US and China trade war will cause too much of. Will not cause like catastrophic um consequences towards the global energy market.